comes the exciting drama of the men and the women who live the passionate adventure of Grand Prix racing. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Did you ever kill anybody?
I hurt somebody's feelings once.
Could you take a picture of me and my wife?
Oh, I know you. I don't think so.
Director John Frankenheimer and Cinerama take you out of the grandstand and hurl you into the most exciting experience of your life.
How did you know it was an ambush?
That's the first thing they teach you.
Who taught you?
I don't remember. That's the second thing they teach you.
I want $100,000. I want it up front. I want another $100,000 when you get the case.
All good things come to those who wait.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
You should do it.
We decide on all the official ratings or rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for over a year. There's something like 40 plus bonus episodes. Oh, yeah. So if you haven't made the jump yet, definitely consider that. Speaking of which, we did have, I think, 2 people make the jump since we last spoke, and that they were Arjan Tranjesker and Dustin Huber. So thanks so much, guys, for getting all those bonus episodes. We appreciate that. And other plug, iTunes. If you guys are listening on iTunes and you guys have been digging the show, give us a good old rating and review over there. Helps us find new listeners, and we appreciate that as well. But I think that about wraps that up. I'm your host, as always, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back.
Welcome back. We got some new movies for you guys today. 2 weeks ago, though, I think would have been the last time you guys heard from us. And forgive we're doing a little bit of time travel here.
Yeah.
So
a little mixed up.
2 weeks ago, we would have been talking with Sean R. Moorhead, Twitter personality, anime Avi guy, and he brought with him 2 Kiyoshi Kurosawa films. We talked Cure, 1997, as well as Serpent's Path, 1998. 2 very bleak,
very dark,
quasi-supernatural crime films / horror films that were a lot of fun to talk about, although a little scary and definitely a little bleak, especially Serpent's Path. So if you haven't heard that, again, that was 2 weeks ago. But last week, you guys would have got your bonus episode. I think that was around the time It Chapter 2 came out. We decided to talk Stephen King because I think we realized we hadn't done him yet. Yeah. So we did Brian De Palma's Carrie, 1976, I believe it was, and also John Carpenter's Christine, 1985.
Thoroughly enjoyed both of those.
We had a lot of fun talking both of those as well. Again, that's patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast if you guys want those episodes. But for today, we have a very special guest with us, taking a break from his cutting reporting on the Jeffrey Epstein murder. We have the pod dad of Chapo Trap House, Will Menaker himself. Will, how are you doing?
Boys, I never walk into a podcast I don't know how to walk out of.
Well said.
That's good. We haven't sealed the exits.
Hey, how about that Epstein? Almost a bit of raspberry jam back there. Yeah. Almost a bit of raspberry jam, man. That's a fact, man. That's a fact.
R.I.P. to a real one.
Hey, shout out Sean Moorhead. Cure is one of my favorite movies that I've seen recently. Fantastic.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, actually, we spoke to him directly about that. It is honestly one of my favorite Japanese films just in general, so I was so glad that someone else brought it on the show because I hadn't yet made the excuse to do it. So yeah, thanks to Sean. And also that movie rules. And if you haven't heard that discussion, again, 2 weeks ago. But this week, as it goes, Will, we have the guests bring on the 2 films with them. So what 2 films have you brought with you, and why do they pair together?
My double feature for you guys are 2 films that are united by director and cars. If you are a fan of watching cars on screen in a film, then you could not do better than John Frankenheimer's Grand Prix from 1966. And then years later, his RONIN from 1998 is 2 great car chase. I guess Grand Prix is really a movie about car sports, but what is a race if not a car chase? And RONIN, his sort of action thriller, which both of these films, in my opinion, contain the best filmed car sequences in motion picture history. The beginning of Grand Prix, he films the actual Monaco F1 circuit. And in Ronin, just like two of the most jaw-dropping car chases ever put to film.
Oh yeah, like this side of like William Friedkin's like French Connection or To Live and Die in L.A. Who usually, when you hear about car chases, that's what you hear. But honestly, you should be hearing more about John Frankenheimer's Ronin in this context.
Absolutely.
Because holy shit, and especially when you look up some of the production details of that, which we will be getting into on how they were doing what they were doing.
Very interesting.
It's very scary watching it and having that information in your head. So yeah, I think we're gonna jump right into it. We usually talk about the more popular of the two films first, so I think that's what we're gonna be doing today. And that film happens to be Ronin. So we are gonna be right back, and we're gonna be talking Ronin.
Get in the car!
From director John Frankenheimer, Robert De Niro, Jean Reno, Natasha McElhone, Stellan Skarsgård, Sean Bean, and Jonathan Pryce.
I won't hurt you.
Ronin.
You worried about saving your own skin? Yeah, I am. Covers my body.
All right, we are talking Ronin, the 1998 American action film written by one John David Zeke, as well as, I guess, sort of touched up and redrafted by crime writer David Mamet, or Mamet.
Oh, okay.
One of those two. Is he French? That's really the part that matters.
Well, the movie takes place in France.
Well, see, that's why I thought.
We'll call him David Mamet
for today.
And again, this movie confirms, a long-held thesis of mine that a film written by David Mamet but directed by someone else usually whips ass. But a movie written and directed by David Mamet mostly sucks shit.
I haven't anything in particular.
What's something that he's
fun?
directed? I don't know that I've seen a David Mamet.
Oh God, The Spanish Prisoner.
God.
Red Belt, some real stink bombs.
Well, Ronin, for those who maybe haven't seen it, I hope you guys have seen it, but if you haven't, there's a very basic plot to this movie.
Oh, yeah.
There's a mysterious case with undisclosed contents that we never really learn. It's one of those like classic MacGuffin situations, but also because there's so much violence surrounding it, it has to take on some kind of like metaphysical quality of like there's got to be something plutonium in there or something.
Yeah, please.
I've always liked to fantasize that it's the Irish nuclear bomb. And
they're trying to get it back, but they can't afford to pay for it.
Yes, exactly. The IRA paid all their money to build a suitcase nuke and then lost it and had to steal it back. And then ushered in the Good Friday Agreement once our good guys secured it by the end of the movie.
Yes, and this case is sought by all kinds of people. Primarily, it's sought by the IRA as well as the Russian mob, but also as a result, you have members of the KGB involved, you have members of MI6, you have obviously IRA members involved, you have the CIA involved, and you have a group of mercenaries who have all been hired by the IRA to reclaim this case.
It's just like an all-star team of like ex-Cold War assets and agencies, I love Ronin because I love any movie that's about like a team being assembled to do a job. It's a bunch of guys getting together to do a mission, and that's what this movie's about. And you've got the ex-CIA guy played by Robert De Niro. You've got the wonderful Jean Reno as like sort of the all-purpose Frenchman. You've got Sean Bain as the fake SAS guy, and Stellan Skarsgård as I think a former Stasi agent.
Yeah, he's the ex-KGB guy, I think.
I believe so.
Or is he German? I can't remember now.
He's German.
Yeah, and then there's Jonathan Pryce, obviously, as the head of the
IRA. Yeah,
and his name, like Seamus O'Rourke.
Seamus O'Rourke. Can't get much more Irish than that.
Come on, that's got to be stereotyping.
When I was rewatching Ronin in preparation for this, I hadn't seen it in a while, and what struck me rewatching it this time is how much of it was just sort of like it's kind of a dude's rock movie. You know what I mean? It's kind of a movie about a bunch of guys on a fun vacation in France. But like any group of friends, you're gonna find, like any group of guys and one woman, you're gonna find one
There's
of them.
some drama, yeah.
There's some drama. You're gonna find, assuming that you're the Robert De Niro character, as I think we all like to think of ourselves.
Of course.
You're gonna find one guy who's your realist homie. That's Jean Reno.
Yeah.
One guy that's like, pretty cool, but dies or you forget about. That's the driver. And I totally forget his character. then you're going to find one guy who's a total poser and a bitch and full of shit. And that's Sean Bain. And then you're going to find one guy who's just straight up snake and is going to sell you out and betray you. And that is Stellan Skarsgård.
Oh, no. Absolutely.
All the recipes for a great heist film.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that it's kind of like a Men on a Mission, because we actually were just talking Men on a Mission movies not that long ago. Like, literally, we were talking World War II Men on a Mission with, like, Where Eagles Dare and stuff. And we did mention on that, like, the modern version of that, I guess, has to be, like, the heist movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Because, again, you get all these kind of, like, ragtag groups together. And in this one here, what I found kind of interesting is that it doesn't at all take the time to actually carve out their personalities. It drops them in and has their personalities revealed kind of through the action.
Each other.
Well, and I was surprised watching this because I was rewatching it actually again, because I was like, I feel like there was a weird structure to that movie, and the first 50 minutes, I actually like checked the time, is all just plotting for the actual heist, the actual mission itself. It's just all of these guys very sort of like coldly and professionally walking you through the process and having
trying to figure each other out
to figure each other out, because one kind of genius move is in the opening scene of this movie, which kind of has like a really neat, like, mystical tribal kind of score to it, even though it's very clearly in like this like shadowy French pub and like cobblestone streets and everything.
Montmartre tribe.
Yeah, but De Niro opens that scene by scoping out the geography of the pub, and he's like kind of like looking at everyone who's in there. He's looking at these different characters, and you can immediately tell that he's scoping it out. One, he's placing his gun outside underneath the crates. He's looking for the exit. He's already monitoring his escape plan. But also, like, we're about to get introduced to all these different characters with different motivations. So he's kind of scoping out all of the different people and seeing who's there for the mission, who, and then once they're all there, it's like, why are they there? Who exactly are they? And all of these questions kind of hang on you and De Niro's character as you kind of watch the movie. And the genius of it is Frankenheimer kind of teaches you how to watch the movie, because you're watching these kind of like minute details of like Robert De Niro very strategically placing his gun at the exit so he has a spot to run and pull it out. And that very much is what the process of the character's thinking as well. So he kind of gets you thinking in line with these people who are analyzing both the geography and the people in the room trying to figure out kind of like the next step. And then as we see when the mission actually undertakes, you can't predict everything. It turns into a sea of controlled chaos where everything goes wrong. And then from there, it is just quick thinking. It's like, what's next? And I love how almost every action scene is immediately punctuated by a scene where they're like, okay, well, what would he do next?
Yeah.
No, it's a very good point about how Frankenheimer sort of teaches you to observe the action as one of the characters, and like the sort of economy of plot. It doesn't really waste anything, and the characters, like they are revealed through the action, and sort of feeling it, like De Niro sort of feels each one of them out. And famously, I think in one of my favorite scenes, he exposes Sean Bain as the what's the color of the boathouse at Hereford, and he said, "You're doing an ambush. I ambushed you with a coffee cup." Like, he backs him into a coffee cup and exposes him as just like a total poser, a guy who doesn't have the real bona fides as the rest of the crew.
Oh yeah, totally stealing valor. He's just like, also, "Were you in the military? I was in the military."
Oh yeah, Sean Bain is the valor thief. And he also exposes Stellan Skarsgård with another coffee cup where he purposely spills coffee and knocks it off the table. And Stellan Skarsgård, lightning quick reflexes, grabs the cup before it hits the ground. Then he's like, okay, this guy's a real one.
Yeah, something I
better
also
watch out for this one.
Yeah, something I also really enjoyed about that moment with Sean Bean was when I think later on they ask De Niro, so what color was the thing? And he goes, how the hell should I know? As if he just made it up to expose Sean Bean. And
Right.
I loved that aspect
Because
of his
obviously, if
character.
he knew, he would be like, "What the hell are you talking about? That's not there."
Yeah, right,
So exactly. So
exactly.
he just kind of again matched his posing.
Yeah, exactly.
to expose him. And I
And
also
he does
love
that
too
throughout the film, which is great.
the way that Frankenheimer shoots that bit with Stellan Skarsgård is amazing too, because it's this amazing split diopter shot connecting Skarsgård with the Irish woman in the back,
I
and
didn't
it's
even notice
so.
Natasha how do you say her name? Natasha McCallone.
Yeah, McCallone from Truman Show, and I think she was also in Soderbergh's Solaris.
And so the Soderbergh Solaris. And if I must say, looking strikingly gorgeous in this film.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
she's rocking all kinds of great turtleneck sweaters, very very tactical. And there is a hilarious scene where they make fun of this too, and they have her actually dress up and like go on like a Bond-esque type hotel mission briefly with De Niro, and she's like so out of place.
Yeah, like she's still so stern-faced and, just can't even... Like, I love how De Niro is constantly like, hey, take a picture. He's kind of given that charm to everyone he's interacting with, but she's
she can't
just
do
stoic
it.
the entire time.
I love that scene because it shows
What an
De
amazing
Niro
scene, man.
is the skilled agency in the field guy, and Deirdre's character is just like the stern IRA taskmaster, and she's like dressing up like the wife on vacation doesn't suit her, and De Niro does that brilliant thing where like they want to take photos of their target as it comes out of the hotel, and he pretends to be a tourist, and he's like, could you take a picture of me and my wife? See, just like this, just snap and click, snap and click, snap and click.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, point directly at us, and we're going to stand exactly where they're going to walk. But
I also love even that small 5-second moment where he tells the guy, he's like, why don't you take a couple pictures with my wife? Just so that De Niro can get like the actual shots he wants.
the exact compositions that he's
like,
looking
why
for.
would you want that?
Well,
It's great, though.
and the also
It's just so natural.
The other amazing detail of that is not only do they want to get pictures of the actual team of people who they are going to be eventually trying to heist the case from, they also want to see how good they are and what their reaction and protocol is in an emergency situation. So he has it set up so the valet crashes the no trespassing sign over,
Right.
just in time for De Niro to come over and shoot pictures of all of them being like, holy shit, a gun's gone off or something's gone off,
And what's
to try
great
and
is
protect the
it
case.
directly cuts to the next scene in which they're talking about, oh, these guys are good.
Yeah.
They're really reactionary, So that was great.
Again, Frankenheimer really walks you through the process of that scene and as De Niro makes these decisions. And it's funny because they never have De Niro say what his decisions are to you.
Right.
They just have him do it. So then you kind of get in that headspace of picking that information up. And one other time where they actually do this that I think I've never seen done this same way in another movie is when they eventually do the action scene with the case, which we will talk about in full because we're going to have to talk about this set piece. This is the first car set piece. But near the end of that set piece, they reveal that they finally have the case. Skarsgård goes over to the case, and for some reason that they don't explain to you, Skarsgård takes the case and puts it into a black bag. And when I first saw that, I was like, why is he putting it in the black bag?
Yeah.
And then
wasn't
then all of a
discussed.
sudden it's not in the black bag, and he's yelling at De Niro to take the case, and he hands him a case. And I was like, wait, he just put that in a black bag. I was so confused. I'm like, what's going on right now?
Yeah.
And then it's very soon after it reveals De Niro looks at his hand, and in a detail there's silver paint on his hand and on his jacket, and he immediately throws the case under the car where it explodes because Skarsgård has just double-crossed them, stolen the case, and given them a fake case with a bomb in it. But again, there's nothing about the movie that reveals that to you other than Skarsgård's literal actions that he takes.
Right.
Because he's actually faking being on the team and giving them the right case after that. So again, and there was nothing previously other than that one scene where De Niro was kind of skeptical of him in that sort of uneasy split diopter shot, and where he tested how good of, you know, an actual sort of asset he's going to be for them.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of amazing to get that scene where De Niro confronts that this guy actually does have skill, and then he watches that skill get used against him, just like in an immediate betrayal that only we're privy to.
Yeah, and from there too, it really shows like Skarsgård's just total dark side to his character. I mean, I think the scene after that is when he's with it might be Seamus. I can't remember.
No, he's with one of the Russian mobsters.
He meets with a guy who's credited in the film as the Dapper Gent.
That's awesome.
He is arranged to now sell him the MacGuffin case. But you know, he's a cagey guy. Always on the lookout. He just double crossed his team, so of course he is going to be looking out for the double cross soon to come. And he goes, you know, it's a dangerous world, Gregor. And he goes, I'll show you how dangerous. And they pull up to a playground, and Skarsgård takes out a silenced pistol with a fucking sight on it and trains it right onto like a little girl on like in a swing set or slide. And at the last moment, the guy like grabs his hand before he like puts a bullet through her, and he goes, I did that to prove a point. Like, I don't even know that girl, and I was going to splatter her brains all over that little house, but I don't even particularly like you. So just think what I'll do to you if you try to double cross me. And then, of course, he is double crossed, but then Skarsgård gets the drop on him a second time and blows his brains out all over a car.
And then also the like attention to detail on the blood, like just the splatter on the window. Oh man, it's visceral.
So good.
A lot of the squib work in this was actually very, very impressively done, and it's funny at how much it's deployed, because I wouldn't say this is an overtly gory movie. I would actually say that for the most part, Frankenheimer in the production actually has a pretty kind of blunt realism that he kind of adheres to, which is a huge part of how they shot the action scenes, which we're eventually going to get into.
We were just talking about Skarsgård, his death, like it's a blunt, just there he is, bullet in the head. And it shows, you know, the bullet right in dead center of the forehead and everything. But
there's just not a lot of accentuating with the guns. Like a lot of it is very matter of fact, realistic gun work. The explosions, while big, they are like realistically big. They're not like that cartoon big. Like this never gets cartoonish. This is all grounded and that's part of why he wanted to reduce as many sort of special effects as he could by having literal Formula One drivers, which is also the connection, drive the cars in this movie.
Oh, okay.
Like to speak of that really before we get into like the first big set piece, the first big car chase in Nice. What I love about the action in this movie, and like what I always look for, like what really separates the god tier action movies from the Pretenders, is that right away, as soon as the guns start firing, as soon as the cars start screeching around, they show you immediately a shitload of just innocent bystanders just get mowed down.
That's exactly,
totally randomly. Like they just start falling, like dropping like flies right away. And all of the cars and all of the guns in this movie, they really underscore over and over again how many innocent people get killed in the crossfire.
Yeah, there's one very specific shot that just it's in my brain. It'll be imprinted. It's where one of the cars just goes into one of the pedestrians and they fly into a fruit stand. And like it's huge, and it's a 2-second shot, but it's right there in your face.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what I was ramping up to. The squib work, weirdly enough, it actually is mostly deployed on civilians because there's parts where there's part at the beginning of that Nice car chase when they just start. I think De Niro pulls out the grenade launcher and hits the first car, and then everyone just starts unloading. And most of the people actually getting hit are the civilians in the background, and you can see like the
and
blood
he focuses
flying
on it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like he really wants you to,
because the characters never do. So Frankenheimer gives you that attention where he's being like, look, this is how ruthless this kind of like criminal underworld type situation is. It's very. It reminded me a lot, actually, and I think this film is a precursor to kind of like the modern action movement we have a little bit now that we see in kind of like the Mission Impossible movies and a little bit in John Wick, where you have like that constantly. They're always surrounded by people, but in the John Wick movies, because there's this idea of they're kind of on like almost like a god level status. That there's kind of like mortals walking around who just never see anything. They're not really paying attention. This is like, those people aren't really paying attention, and because of that, they're just getting absolutely eviscerated.
I mean, like he like you said, he keeps it pretty realistic, but obviously like the god tier of just wanton innocent death would be, of course, Paul Verhoeven in the subway scene in Total Recall or RoboCop. I mean, like Paul Verhoeven like does it to like such a gratuitous degree that it just comes back around to just being like so brilliant and perfect, but done to such a ludicrous degree.
Yeah, he just loves watching shredded bodies.
Yeah.
And Frankenheimer's got that, but he just doesn't go that far with the gore.
Yeah. Frankenheimer likes to keep it pretty slick, pretty realistic, not and just so obscenely over the top like Verhoeven does.
Yeah.
Right. And that's part of his kind of what he translates to his action here by shooting all of this like kind of for real and having a lot of professional drivers drive these cars at real speeds. He said he didn't want to do that.
That is the amazing thing, like why the car chases in this movie. And I remember seeing this in the theater when I was a kid and being, absolutely riveted by the car action in it. Even from like before the Nice set piece, there's sort of like a small mini car chase after the gun deal in Paris goes awry. They sort of skate real quick from the Paris police. And you hear that engine in that Audi just like roar, and he has this camera mount on the front, and you really feel how fast the car is going because, as you guys pointed out, they do not fake at all the speeds of the cars in these scenes. Like, like they don't film it at a lower frame rate and then speed it up like to cheat. Like like
that's what a lot of like action and chase sequences do. So and he specifically said, "I'm going into this movie. I am not doing that."
Yeah.
So if you're wondering why this feels different, that's why.
In those scenes, those cars are going like 100 kilometers an hour, and you really, really feel it. Like
yes, you do. And I was like nervous while watching it. Like I was like, and I rarely feel that way.
He doesn't score any of the car chases to music, not mostly. He really just lets the sounds of the engine just fill the entire screen.
No, that's a huge point because I think the only time there's any music is near the end of the big Paris one. But again, it's like a 10-minute chase sequence, so it comes in at like the last 2 minutes of the chase when like they hit the bridge and like just the drama has been ramped up a little bit. Right. But like before that, again, it really is just in the sound design of the roar of the engine, like the scrape of metal, the gunfire like knocking like windshields and mirrors off, and like that is like your score for this movie. And again, talk about like attention to detail. Some of these beats in here, now that I know that they did them for real, I'm like, how could they have possibly have done that? Because there's one perfectly timed moment in that Paris chase scene where they are like driving through cars and one transport truck immediately has to like slam on the brakes scene, right? To avoid them. No, a little bit before that. A little bit before they hit the actual bridge and highway part or the tunnels.
Right.
But one car just squeaks by that transport truck, the one in front, as it does a sudden stop. And they might have got this by accident. I'm not totally sure. But when De Niro and Jean Reno come up in the car behind them, the transport truck stopped so suddenly that the car that it was carrying on top of it, because it was carrying a bunch of like cars to a dealership, falls off the front of it and smashes the ground, blocking the path where that car just went. So then they have to take a side route and kind of like drive around it. But again, like a small action beat detail like that is like just messy enough, but clearly John Frankenheimer is such a controlled filmmaker that really to me was like a constantly riveting contradiction of watching like his perfect Steadicam camera moves and all of this, and watching just like what is like perfectly orchestrated like chaos of people getting mowed down and shredded and cars running into each other, cars going at full speed just like narrowly missing each other, or even just like there's one where they like try to do that like 180 or drift past a bus and they just like scrape the bus briefly before they continue off.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like it's amazing to watch.
Yeah, and he used a real team of like real rally car drivers for this, and I think they did a thing where like they set up dummy steering wheels. They used like British cars where the steering wheel was on what we would say was the passenger seat, and then they set up a dummy steering wheel for the actor, and I think filmed it with a mirror or something, so it looks like they're really driving it, which is an incredible technique. And just like again, I know this is the cliche for like film nerd Twitter, but again, I just have to I have to underscore again the absolute pleasure of real drivers, real cars exploding and being flipped, real blanks, real squibs, and like just the actual destruction of property. Like it can't be fake. Like there's nothing. We love to see it. We just love to see it.
Yeah, there's nothing quite that feels like that.
Yeah.
So like when you're watching it in these cameras, my God.
The scene that I always think of in the Nice car chase scene, where they're going down that amazingly beautiful like mountain road, and De Niro pops out of the sunroof of that Mercedes with a bazooka.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
And there's
flips over in an explosion.
Yeah.
And then slides down the mountain road. It's just and
there's a POV shot behind De Niro's shoulder with the bazooka poking his head out of the car, and you can see it's De Niro driving at full speed with his head sticking out of this car and a bazooka. And
it's fantastic. Something I also love just about these,
and somehow that feels real. Like you're watching, like again,
true.
like that's so absurd. But the way that
that
they
is more
filmed
like
it,
a Rambo thing, you know. But he still finds a way to keep it grounded in realism.
Yeah.
Something I also love about these the car chases is the amount of locations they go throughout each of them. They start somewhere and end somewhere completely else. Like the one it starts like, I believe, in the city, onto the highway, onto the countryside, into like this off-road area, and then they go into another part of the city.
That off-road bit reminded me of like White Lightning.
Yeah, a little
Burt
bit.
Reynolds like doing the back roads driving and stuff. Just because like again, another movie with like real cars and real chases in it and stuff. Except this is like obviously even much faster because he's like, I'm just gonna hire real Formula One drivers. So,
there's also a great POV shot where they're going through like this. It's kind of like a tunnel, but instead there's pillars next to it, and so it just
By
goes
the way,
zoom, 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 zoom.
I was gonna say, I don't know if you noticed that, but they directly ripped that off.
Mission Impossible
in the
4?
new Fallout film. Yeah, Mission Impossible Fallout.
Or is it? Yeah, whatever it is at this point. But yeah, no, I made note of that. I was like, this reminds me exactly of that motorcycle sequence for sure.
Yeah, where they're going through the pillars and it's like
it gives this like shutter effect. It's awesome.
Yeah, Frankenheimer just has like a really, really clear eye for action and staging and composing it. And the fact that he went through the difficulty of, again, filming this all for real and driving at insanely high speeds, all of that combined together just like is insanely compelling to watch. And then again, to also put this, though, in like a really stylish, like almost like... it's not quite noir. It's more in the realm of like Jean-Pierre Melville, like his kind of like stylish 60s crime movies. He did like Le Samurai, or I talked to you a little bit about that Army of Shadows, which was his version of like the World War II film as kind of like a bit of a gangster movie.
Oh, okay.
Which is, it's a lot of guys.
Amazing film, but amazing film.
I love Army of Shadows.
Army of Shadows is wonderful.
Yeah, and Frankenheimer seems to be kind of like mirroring some of that. I mean, maybe it's also just the French settings. You get a lot of this great architecture and these shadowy locations, but he also has a lot of cool dudes wearing sick jackets, leather jackets, trench coats. They're in hats. They're fucking doing double crosses in shadowy tunnels on cobblestone roads. And like that is what is in between these like super stellar, amazing action scenes. So, and I found that stuff almost just as compelling.
Yeah.
Well, the movie, like I said at the beginning, like it's a dude's rock movie. Like what the movie, like, I remember when the movie came out, like it's just like, I think a lot of critics are like, I couldn't follow the plot, like what was going on, and it's like, it doesn't matter. They never tell you what's in the case. It is just a pure MacGuffin. What the movie is really about is just like a dude love story between Robert De Niro and Jean Reno.
You're goddamn right it is.
Like they're just two real ass dudes who have like, from the same world, who just like come together and they just like love and respect each other by the end of the movie.
Well, and
that
like,
ending is touching.
Well, yeah, like it even sets it up for you. I mean, even in the ending, he literally says like, no questions, no answers, or whatever, right? Like that's the same thing. Like he's like, I'm fucking confused. Like you were confused. I'm in the movie. Like
yeah, exactly.
But it's a great point. But also, it kind of comes back to obviously like the central metaphor. The reason they even call it Ronin and open the text the way that they do. The idea of kind of like these wandering professionals. These people. I mean, the idea. Obviously, we've talked about it because we've talked about samurai films on the show already before. But samurai has a master. And when you are kind of like a lone samurai and you don't have a master and you're kind of sort of like disrespected, like a little bit in Seven Samurai, which I guess should be called Seven Ronin now that I actually think about it. You're a Ronin, but instead of these guys serving previous masters, like they all served like previous states. And what we
Yeah.
were kind of seeing is kind of like a remnant of all of these different people who worked in different kinds of secret services or fought in certain militaries. And there's kind of like this tying together of the criminal underworld as well as the political underworld, because it's obviously all of these different sort of political factions also fighting for this stuff and paying them kind of like under the table. So it's like this weird thing where like they're no longer getting paid as like a government agent. They're getting paid by the same governments to do like way grosser shit. They've kind of just found like a new kind of industry for this. And one thing I found really fascinating, and actually friend of the show, I got to shout him out, friend of the show, Dave Imboden, actually wrote this specifically in his review, so I can't say it without mentioning him, otherwise I'll be fucking plagiarizing him. But what he said about this was that there's actually a lot of focus on this as these guys as like blue collar workers almost.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Very early on in the movie, when they're all just sort of like have just assembled and are at the safe house for the first time. De Niro and Sam and Vincent begin their sort of their love affair. Jean Reno offers him one of those really cool yellow cigarettes, and De Niro says, "Are you labor or management?" And Jean Reno says, "If I was management, I wouldn't give you a cigarette." Like, there's this character like over and over again, like just like I'm a guy who needs a job. Or when the character with in the scene where they go to the Michael Lonsdale character's place to do for the great self-surgery scene.
What a great scene.
Of course, Lonsdale is a guy who, I don't know, some ex-intelligence guy who now just like does little, I don't know, Warhammer style like figurine painting, but for samurai. And he says like a Ronin is a man without a master. He's like, you understand that, right? And De Niro goes, right now I'm a man without a job. I'm a man without a paycheck.
Yeah. And he even says at one point he tells him the story about all of the Ronins who, when their master was slayed, they went back and they got like vengeance by sneaking into a castle and then committing suicide. And De Niro's like, sounds like my kind of job or whatever. And they also have a lot of talk too about like De Niro was constantly asking, we need
more guys, we need more money, and like,
there's one point where he literally
is like constantly trying to, skimp out on workplace protection.
Yeah, he literally negotiates comp for everyone at one point where he's like, okay, this just got more dangerous, so everyone's getting a raise.
He was a working class hero in that movie, slightly undermined by the I guess slight twist at the end that he is not in fact a Ronin, but is as always still been with the
motherfucking
agency.
snake.
However, he is sort of like a union organizer. Yeah, he gets everyone a big paycheck. He stands up for labor against Jonathan.
Yeah, and I love that he's always like asking questions, trying to be like, okay, so like who are we going after? Like, do you know anything about this? Like, who are our employers? What are we going after?
Yeah, and he seems to be like the only one too, which is
well, yeah, because even the one guy's just when
the other guys just want to get the job done and they don't really care about the details
in that
as
really
much.
awesome tunnel double cross sequence early on when they're trying to buy the weapons, and De Niro gets a bad feeling about going into the tunnel because he's like, okay, why would they just have us walk further? Why couldn't they just drive up? So he's getting a bad feeling about it.
Makes sense.
And he looks over to like to Jean Reno and he's just like, dude, like you don't have to go in there. And he's just like, I'm getting paid to go in there.
Yeah.
Like, is his response.
This is my job.
Yeah. So
I also wanted to just say, I thought for the short time that he's in it, I thought Sean Bean was fantastic.
Oh, his raspberry jam bit that Will mentioned at the top of the show, was losing my mind.
I also
almost turned into a bit of raspberry jam back there.
I also love when it all pops off and they start shooting at them in that tunnel sequence.
Yeah.
Where they escape and they start driving away and they're getting away with it. Just to show that Sean Bean's character is kind of like not used to this or whatever. He's the only one in the back, like freaking out, like, we made it! It's okay! We're doing all right! We've done it! Yeah! And he's like super pumped up and just giving himself away as it goes. I thought his
and then
short
of course
part
has
was
to
great.
pull over and then just vomit immediately.
Yeah, exactly. It's like just he's already given it away, and then he does something like that. It's I thought it was a great performance.
Well, yeah, and that was how De Niro kind of knew that he wasn't a pro. Like that he was shooting and killing people for like the first time. And
especially like even the first thing, like you have him freaking out then, but even prior you were saying it's like, why are we going in this tunnel? Like, this is not a good idea. And Sean Bean was the one to kind of egg that on, where he's like,
he's like, let's just get it done. He's like, let's just do it, get it done. Don't want to hear about it anymore. And then as soon as it starts popping off, he just starts spraying, and his character is just going. He's like, yeah, get some.
Everyone else is like completely straight faced and silent, like
doing
froze.
the job,
workman like efficiency.
It's awesome just how many details there are that he's not a pro. Before that scene where De Niro confronts him and is like, oh, you could draw a figure about Crossfire. Fucking idiot. Where'd you learn that?
Yeah.
But to the working class thing of like, you've ever seen, pros and posers, Sean Bean begins to give himself away because he's like trying to do like the manly tough guy shop talk.
Right.
He's like, I'm a weapons man.
Yeah.
I'm a weapons man. Like, what do you like using to De Niro? And he's like, it's the tool for a job. A gun is a gun.
There's
this isn't Ocean's 11, bro.
There's actually a lot. One thing I do appreciate about David Mamet's punch up of the screenplay, because I heard that a lot of it was just that they couldn't get a lot of the characterizations right, which is why they kind of brought him in to kind of do a lot of the dialogue. And there is a lot of his kind of like tough guy crime novel dialogue in this, where I love the bit where Sean Bean says to him, he's like, "You ever kill anybody?" He's like, "I hurt somebody's feelings once." And there's a lot of straight talk like that where he's like, "You worried about saving your own skin?" He's like, "Yeah, I am. It covers my body." and like it's so simple.
What do you want for Christmas? My 2 front teeth.
Yeah, exactly.
And it does sound so slick and so cool coming out of like an actor like Robert De Niro's mouth in that kind of way.
And can I say, this was like a lot of people, I think you were saying to me just a couple weeks ago, a lot of people say that like Heat was kind of one of his big ending,
performances where like they felt like he really tried and went for it. Yeah, he's great in this.
It's almost like his character from Heat didn't die and then became like a really, really
joined the CIA.
No,
it's like
I know what to do, guys. I've done heists,
It was like if his character from Heat didn't die and had even like an ounce of a sense of humor. You know what I mean? Because I this slight digression about Heat. Like, I think one of my favorite moments in Heat is when what's her name? Amy Brenneman's character.
I think I know exactly what
starts flirting with him at the diner, and she starts talking to him, and he's like, "Lady, why are you talking to me?" And then she's like, "Nothing. Just what are you reading?" And he goes, "A book about metals." It's like he can't talk to people at all.
Yeah. There's like no charm. That's a good point.
Yeah, he's just he really is like just like full blown professionalism in that. Whereas this, he kind of has he's got a bit of like an irony streak to him.
Where
he's been a professional.
He's got a kind of a sense of humor in this.
100%. And we should get to it. The big climax of this, which so we have the 2 major car chase sequences, which are both phenomenal. But the end of this film is actually kind of like a pretty very typical for a crime novel where you have just like the third act that takes place at a location that was mentioned earlier in the film.
Right.
And everything kind of just goes to shit. But I was surprised again at how well orchestrated that all of this was. I was actually surprised people found it confusing because on my rewatch of it, I was actually drawn by like how easily I was following every single person's decision process that they were making.
Yeah, me too.
Where, because the last bit of this takes place at sort of like a figure skating show that they're putting on. And at this point, every single different faction has been involved, whether in the first car chase or the second car chase. We kind of have an idea of who's involved in this. There's the Russian mob. There's people working for the Russian mob, who Stellan Skarsgård killed when he pretended to or he was going to shoot the child. I guess he didn't pretend to. He would have shot that child.
Yeah, definitely would have.
that was the whole thing. And although I do love that scene even more, in context with the scene that follows in the rink, because again, he sets up like another life or death bluff, but he pulls it with like the head of the Russian mob who just straight up calls it.
Yeah, he's like, fuck you.
Yeah, like the head of the Russian mob. And like I love the way they set it up, because they first introduced the character after Skarsgård calls him from the phone of the dapper gent after he kills him, and he's like, "Is the job done?" And he's like, "Haha, it's me. Bet you didn't think I was going to pick up the phone right now.
Fucking idiot.
My price just went up 300%." And the Russian mob guy is seen applauding, watching, a beautiful young figure skater rehearse, who's his girlfriend or the object of his, the affections of his cold criminal heart, and he's delighted by this beautiful figure skater. I think it was a real figure skater who played that character.
Yeah, real Olympic.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, a real Olympic figure skater, and he's delighted by her, and this is the one bit of affection that he has in his cold, Russian criminal heart. And Skarsgård sets it up. He's like been double crossed so many times, and he's like, "Look, I got the case here. Like, I know you're going to try to double cross me, and my dead man switch is I have a sniper that's going to kill your beautiful figure skater unless you unless I don't call him in 30 seconds." And the Russian mob guy lets him kill the fucking girl and then puts a bullet straight through his head.
Yeah.
Well, and even funnier is I actually think it might be the reverse. I think he actually shoots him, and then knowing that the figure skater is going to get shot anyway, and doesn't even try to prevent it. Just is just like, yeah, that's fine. She's about to die in 10 seconds.
Yeah, you're done, bro.
Yeah, whatever. It's done. And there's an amazing shot too that he sets up perfectly, because again, I think Frankenheimer's attention to detail in some of the compositions and the widescreen lensing. He shot a lot of this with wide angle lenses, and so he can fit a lot of the background into the frame. Because again, he wants you to pay attention to those backgrounds where civilians are getting shredded and everything.
Right.
But the shot that he sets up with Skarsgård is Skarsgård very detailed, looking at him, telling him about his bluff, and in the background is the figure skater on the television. And then when De Niro and Jean Reno run into the room too late after that double cross had just went down, they look down, they see Skarsgård, bullet in the forehead, dead. And then the camera pans up because they look up and they see the dead figure skater on the television still. Shot. They haven't cut away. It's her lying dead on the ice on the television. And then immediately they're just like, yeah, okay, moving on. So they just go right back to the mission. And this sequence is so amazing because Seamus McGarvey, played by Jonathan Pryce, is the head of the IRA guy. He's involved in all of this, and he double crosses the Russians, or at least gets involved as well by dressing up as a security guard who's handling a young child, moves away from the young child to pull out a gun and gun them both down.
And what I love what he's doing to the young child is consoling her, trying to be oh, it's okay, darling, don't worry.
About the person she just saw shot in the figure skating
we'll find
rink.
your mom, and then the next second he's taking out a gun and just popping 3 guys in front of the child.
Another brutal detail I love is when the figure skater gets no-scoped, she's in the middle of one of those fantastic spins that they do on the ice.
Yeah, just to add a little bit of detail there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and another detail because this scene, no joke, this scene reminded me of that Key and Peele sketch that where it's just nothing but double crosses. You know the one that I'm talking about, where one guy pulls out a gun and then the other guy's like, actually, I was a fucking secret agent or a sleeper agent the whole time, and he's just like, oh yeah, well I was you, and he rips off a mask and it's just how many double crosses can you fit in 3 minutes? This movie does 10, and as they're chasing down, because again the big double cross at the very very end is Robert De Niro being yeah, I'm not actually a mercenary professional. I never left. I am still working with the CIA. I was just embedded in this mercenary group to try to get closer to the IRA who was paying us, which is why he was asking all the questions about the employer, and so that he can kill Jonathan Pryce's character. But the best bit is when he goes back into the rink to take down Jonathan Pryce, you can see in the background the figure skater dead on the ice still, the ambulance people picking her up. So the one shot, Jonathan Pryce is running in and she's dead in the background. And then De Niro chases after him. And in the background, they're walking past De Niro with her on a stretcher in the background.
Jesus Christ.
And it's so...
Frankenheimer.
It's a gag. That is a physical gag about the death of a beautiful
innocent
Olympic skater.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's completely horrifying. And then again, De Niro still loses the upper hand, and John Reno, who was previously just shot outside, is the one who gets him from behind. It's the 10th time in that whole sequence that someone gets the upper hand on someone else and is like, haha.
Yeah, for sure. It's incredible.
So yeah, and that's the climax of the movie is this super really grim, stylish, noir double cross craziness on top of all of that. So I gotta say, pretty goddamn impressive movie. I think heading towards the reductive rating around here, which for you, Will, is the part of the show where we remove all the words, all the nuance, and we give the movie a number between 1 and 5, but it's also kind of turned into closing statements. So if there's anything else you have left to say about the movie, or any like scenes we didn't get to or lines that you want to mention before we go out, that's also where we do it here. But for me, this is like a really, really solid to high, like 4 out of 5 for me. I feel like in a few rewatches, this could just grow in my estimation. Because even on this rewatch, I was like noticing small details I didn't pick up before. Like, again, I never noticed that figure skater bit before. And picking up on it this time, I was like, wow, that is so dark. Yeah. And speaks perfectly to, again, this kind of like really sort of like disgusting criminal and political underworld that these guys kind of operate in, and also, but kind of like the kind of nonchalant and professional attitude you have to maintain to kind of like stay sane inside of it. And also, like, it's a guys being dudes men on a mission type thing.
Yeah,
so
we
like
got that touching ending. I love that.
Yeah, you're also still kind of affectionate for the way that, there was a sense of vulnerability between De Niro and John Reno's character as they kind of learned to work with each other and kind of read the room together. And despite the fact that pretty much every single person they interacted with died in this movie, except for
those two.
The IRA woman.
Lives.
She made her way out
and
as well.
Speaking of Heat, it kind
the
of has that
same
vibe,
bit
right? Where
as
he's
Heat.
just like, I gotta do it. I'm sorry. I have to move on. You know, that whole thing.
Drive off. Yeah. I mean, it's a little less heartbreaking just because.
Oh, definitely.
In Heat, that relationship is just so fleshed out.
Yeah.
And also and
I think he's trying to make it more cold in this movie.
This movie is colder intentionally because the characters are a little bit colder, whereas in Heat, the thing about them is that even though they have cold professions, they are both very sensitive, vulnerable people, which is just kind of like what all of Michael Mann's are. Like, he makes very stylish crime movies for like that are basically macho weepies. Like, you can't watch any of his movies and not just be like, oh, that muscly man is so sad.
they're all emo thugs.
Yeah,
I did read that they shot a couple like different endings of the movie that like didn't test well, but one of the original endings of the movie, after Deirdre, Natasha McElhone, gets away, like Jean Reno and Robert De Niro's character don't notice, so they never see, or like, but basically Deirdre is just thrown into a van by the IRA, black bagged, and like probably tortured to death and killed as a traitor.
Oh, I might have actually preferred that.
Yeah.
Because that's even grimmer. That would hammer home kind of like the more darker, seedier elements of this that are always implied and always there. Because again, Frankenheimer pays so much attention to detail about actually how gross a lot of this stuff is.
And there's even that scene. I think it's the guy that makes the miniature Ronins, the guy that does the surgery or whatever. He explains that sacrificial thing that the samurais do.
The seppuku.
And I thought that was going to kind of lead to something, but it doesn't really, to what I could tell anyway. And I thought it was going to lead into something like that, or maybe De Niro sacrifices himself or something like that.
Something for honor.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, I would say same with you. High 4. I could see this thing growing as well. It's the second time I watched it. I really did get to kind of feel what he was doing in regards to showing the violence that just normal everyday civilians go through. Like, now that you've explained that whole thing with the figure skater in the background, it's like he's constantly trying to remind you, even though all this kind of cool heist action's going on, these are the victims that are being killed in the background. It's all these normal, innocent people. And I thought that was
nice
just
touch.
such a great attention to detail that he throws in there. And then, of course, there's just the car chases, which are phenomenal. Like, this guy's he really knows how to ramp up action and just make such an intense few scenes and set pieces.
Yeah, I also thought like the ruthless, we never mentioned it, but like there's like a really ruthless like rhythm to it. It's very propulsive.
Yeah,
like this movie never stops. Like, even in moments where it's like quiet, I feel like it's always moving.
Definitely.
Like kind of like a car. But also, before we moved on, I also wanted to shout out one line. I once removed a guy's appendix with a grapefruit spoon. which is so sick. And it's in that shot that's almost ripped from the Manchurian Candidate too, because we did talk about John Frankenheimer earlier. We did the Manchurian Candidate in Seconds, his 60s films. And there's one, he loves mirror shots. Like that one of Rock Hudson in Seconds, looking at like the 4 different mirrors while his like face has come, he's looking at his new face.
Right.
But the bit where Robert De Niro is doing the self-surgery, or at least walking Jean Reno how to do pull the bullet out of him, and it's like this shot of De Niro's face in the mirror looking at his own wound, but we have the shot of his abdomen there and everything as they're like slicing into it. Oh, just gross.
Yeah.
But for you, Will.
Oh yeah, I mean, I concur. God tier Frankenheimer, completely stacked cast. Like I said, 2 of the greatest car chases ever put to film. Just jaw-dropping action in this movie. Well, yeah, one of the best action thrillers of the '90s. I will give this movie 1 Audi A8 with a nitro booster injection system.
Fantastic.
Sounds good. All right. Well, we are going to be right back. I think that will wrap it up for Ronin 1998. We're going to be right back, and we are going to be talking Grand Prix.
Grand Prix.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Grand Prix, the 1966 American sports drama film directed by, once again, John Frankenheimer. I believe that this was both his first color film, because
cool.
This film, I think, is the one that came right after Seconds, which we already did, which came out in 1966. And as we know, that was a really inky, disgusting black and white film that almost had like a Lynchian sense of horror to it.
He really has some range. Like this is unreal. We go from like I've seen Mandarin
4 different films, and they've all been completely different,
It's
despite
crazy.
the fact that you can tell that there's like a real technical precision interlocking all of the films together. Again, he's ranged from like sort of like political paranoia to kind of slick crime to like full out kind of like identity thriller horror. And now we're doing the good old sports melodrama, which we haven't done sports yet on this show. And I don't know that we've actually done big melodrama yet either. Maybe Lawrence of Arabia is a little melodramatic.
Yeah, that'd be the closest, I think.
But this is a little broader. It's a little soapier. It's a little in the realm of kind of like old Hollywood. And it was interesting to read that John Frankenheimer mostly did agree to do to this movie because of the access it gave him to Formula One. Because
so he really wanted to just focus on those cars
previous
a lot.
to this film, they never let anyone really like actually go in there and film it. They might have done TV broadcasting of it, I'm not sure, but they didn't actually let anyone have access to behind the scenes Formula One. And actually they were skeptical of even letting him do it, but he said, look, like I don't want to just do something stupid that's going to make your thing look shitty. He's like, I want to actually like get in there. So he shot some test footage for them with cars, and he said, this is what I want to hook up to your cars. And then they were like, oh yeah, we want that. So they gave him 100% full cooperation and just said, you can literally film
do whatever
like,
you
actual
want.
races. Like you can do like anything that you want. They were like, we will lend you our drivers. We will even lend you our drivers to train some of your actors to drive, which some of these actors did learn to drive professionally.
So some of those shots are pretty authentic then. Wow, that's incredible. Because I was wondering how they were doing that.
The whole first like 20 minutes of the movie, the Monaco sequence is like, he really filmed like the actual like circuit in Monaco, which is one of like, I'm not like a big like car racing guy, but it is like one of the most impressive spectacles like in sports is like they turned like that whole city into an F1 track, and it is incredible.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to watch, especially because he shot it in like the Super Panavision 70mm. So like these huge lenses, this huge film stock. And then apparently they projected this in 70mm Cinerama, which basically means they had 3 different projectors. And they used a curved screen so that they could extend the length of the shot. So when people were watching this in that format, like you would have felt like you were there. Like
especially those POV shots, because it seems like he on purposely sets those POV shots at the height of their speed and always when they're doing turns, and it really gives you this. This idea of what these guys have to do just impulsively. Like it's like there's the turn, just go sharp, and it's they're going 120 miles per hour, something like that. and it's just it's so impressive. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
By the way, I believe that he used the same camera rigs in Ronin as he did originally in Grand Prix. It's like the same model
cool.
capture shots. Like,
Well, yeah, you could
over 40 years later.
Well, yeah, because you
Wow.
could. I read, I think, that he invented them for this movie.
Yes.
Holy shit. This dude's amazing.
Because no one had actually filmed Cars the way that they filmed Cars in this movie.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, like, the shots, like, where they that they
POV
show
of the cars
not
and,
only
like-
the POV, but the shot where they're showing the driver drive the car.
Oh yeah,
it's
and
set
with
on
no
the car.
windshield, like seeing their
Yeah.
skin there
yeah.
and everything.
It's unbelievable.
It's horrifying. Like,
And what's great too is how he paces or spaces out the techniques that he uses. Like with every race, he adds another camera technique that you haven't seen before, just so it's like, you know,
There's
he just
something
shows
else happening
everything
there.
that he's capable of. It's
yeah, he
great.
has so many different camera setups for these racing sequences. It's
Yeah.
actually kind of insane just to like think about like
And
organizing
then even, like,
that
the
or
editing,
orchestrating
like there's
that.
a part where it'll constantly show the drivers and the cars, but then it does a split screen with the
Yeah.
audience members that are focused on them, and that's great too.
Yeah, like he uses split screen. He uses like handheld grounded shots. He'll switch to like helicopter shots. He'll switch to car
Yeah.
mounts.
Oh yeah, some of
both
those heli shots following the cars just
Yeah.
for like a solid minute. Oh, it's great.
Yeah,
I mean, like I think the thing too. I mean, it's like other than the virtuoso way in which he films cars in motion. I mean, it's like a very, very dramatically different film than Ronin. And I think like the thing
Yeah.
to keep in mind about Grand Prix is that it's made in the '60s. It was his first color film, but it was like also. Like the type of movie that was very much in vogue of that era, which were these huge, grand international productions that featured, the American, like a huge international cast and setting and like co-production. So you have James Garner, but like Yves Montand, and I think Antonio Sabato, like the Italian, French, Ava Marie Saint, and then I think for your listeners, the sleazes out there, probably my favorite, of course, Toshiro Mifune has a supporting role as the Honda team owner, based on the founder of Honda.
Yeah, he's the Yamura character who is sort of like the last minute funder of James Garner's character, who kind of gets kicked out because they think that he
the
took
Ferrari
out his partner.
team. Yeah.
Because to be fair, he did really harm his partner. But
Here's rewatching that movie. James Garner, who's like the hero of this movie, is a huge dick throughout this entire movie.
He's not a likable character at all.
He's really unlikable.
Yeah, very. From beginning to end.
He's pretty
he doesn't-
irredeemable.
I was
And,
really thinking there would be
wins
a...
at the end too. After another guy dies.
Yeah, it's and then what I find interesting, I mean, we are just jumping to the end here, but you brought it up and I think it just fits, is jumping from one of his, I don't know if they call each other friends, but at least colleagues that they have appreciation for. After he finds out about his death, the scene after is just him like reminiscing about the good times on the track, which I love that sequence where he's just like hearing the engines rev and all that.
Yeah.
But it's just to have such a terrible thing happen right before in the scene directly prior to that was interesting.
And he's just like, man, the good times we've had.
Even though I almost killed my teammate and one of my colleagues literally died.
Yeah, well,
Great times.
and it's funny because it's not even because he intentionally harms that teammate in that first race.
No, it's just
it's
being
just because
negligent
he was kind of he was
and
just
selfish.
selfish.
Yeah,
he
selfish,
wanted to keep racing, and then he decides too late to give up, and then his brakes don't work, even though everyone was telling him, "Yo, get off the track, move over," and he decides to move over like at the worst time. And that actual shot, by the way, that crash where I don't know if there's a dummy in that car when he smashes that wall, but it looks like his head crashes into that wall and then he flies off into the water and
the
it
fact,
looks real.
And
it's
these
convincing.
guys don't have a roof. This is just if this thing flips, that's your head on concrete. There
you're
it
just,
is.
Yeah, you're just dead.
It's just that adds such a... I was so nervous watching those crash sequences.
Yeah, they actually, one of the characters, I think, it might be James Garner's character, has sort of like a voiceover while they're doing that opening race where he describes it perfectly. Where he said that it's like sitting in a coffin surrounded by gasoline, like being inside of a bomb. That's how he describes driving and the adrenaline of it. So it immediately sets that this is a very dangerous to drive at these sort of like extraordinary speeds
they
like
say
this.
that they need a lack of imagination because they don't actually want to think about death. You know, they just want to drive. So it's I loved those. I also loved the voiceovers in general when they would explain something technical to you, because like, you know, you see them gear up and all that stuff. It's just, as a person that's not a car guy, I don't really know what they're doing. It just looks really impressive. So to have those voiceovers while you have such great visuals of the race to explain some of the technicalities, I thought was pretty effective.
Right, but I feel like also just like kind of that propulsive adrenaline of it
Absolutely.
really just gets you into the zone of why people would be putting, like why those men put their bodies into harm's way.
Right.
And then also a kind of sort of...
Yeah, like there's that line where he's like, you just drive and hope that your car doesn't blow up or something
Yeah,
like that.
and one thing I wish the movie kind of explored a little bit more, but it is there on the periphery, and they do come back to it a little bit of time, is also how an industry kind of like builds itself around that.
Yes.
That everybody recognizes that these people are just fucking crazy and basically trying to kill themselves, but everyone is in their own way, you know, sort of profiting off of that craziness.
Yeah, and just getting entertainment out of it.
Yeah, so it follows kind of like their emotional lives as, you know, they're falling in love, they're maybe getting married, or, you know...
It's like, you know, each one of these cars is like a huge investment, but they also are like, you know, moving advertisements for actual, you know, car makers like Ferrari, McLaren, and Honda. So it's like the car that, you know, like the driver obviously gets to, you know, hoist the trophy, but it's also like the car that kind of, if your car wins the race, it's like you have the best, you know, the best engineers, the best engine, etc.
Exactly. And there is something thorny in there about the idea of like these people putting their lives on the line to like move product in this way,
right?
And that it directly hammers home both the danger and sort of like almost like the frothing excitement of it. Like that, there's one great bit where one guy, I think, like he crosses the finish line on fire, and everyone,
it's the American,
and everyone comes up to him ready to take photos because they're hoping for like a charred corpse that they can put on the, you know, on the front of the newspaper or whatever. And everyone's and like he's just like, what the hell?
Yeah,
like is this what you want? Like,
yeah.
Like they're excited at the idea of seeing some kind of spectacled violence in that kind of way.
Yeah.
And you know, so there is a little bit of that in the periphery, but there is a lot more time kind of spent with these guys in what mostly amounts to kind of like an old Hollywood melodrama and like trying to live out their emotional lives and kind of the stress that the work puts on their relationships.
I mean, most of the actual movie, and it's a very, very long movie.
It's 3
like most
hours.
of the, 3 hours long. Most of the actual movie is just about like, you know, classic 1960s, just like, you know, people cheating on their wives and having affairs. Like,
yeah, pretty much.
Just what people did back then.
hate to see it.
Honestly, there weren't too many likable people in this movie.
My favorite thing, like, you know, peripheral to like the film itself, as you mentioned early on, like the realism of Frankenheimer worked with all these real F1 drivers to like put these actors in the cars and like train them, you know, in actually how to drive these, you know, incredible pieces of engineering and machinery. And basically none of the actors could do it. Like they couldn't even shift gears in one of these things, save for James Garner. God Garner got so fucking good at it. Like he was so fucking talented. Like he worked with one of these, a famous driver, Bob Bondurant of the Shelby Cobra team, and Garner got so good at it that I think he actually went on to do like a sort of semi-amateur circuit.
Wow.
Yeah, they basically said
that's incredible.
They told him, the people like training him, they were like, dude, if you hadn't become an actor, you actually could have been a pro racer.
That's crazy.
Because they were just like the natural talent to pick
probably
it
would
up
have felt
was
a little
there.
conflicted about it, given
Yves Montand or like Antonio Sabato. Like I don't think any of those guys could like even figure out how to start one of those cars.
He probably would have been a little conflicted about it, given the script, constantly talking about death and things like. He's probably like, I'll stick to acting though.
Well, yeah. Speaking of which, one thing I looked up watching that I didn't realize watching this film, but when I looked it up, I was like, holy fuck. 5 of the pro racers who drove in this film, they died within 2 years of this film being made.
Jesus.
On the track.
Oh my god.
5 of them in 2 years, and I think
so
they
that's
said,
how dangerous
and I think
really
they
is.
said
This movie's like The Ring.
Yeah. They said if you extend it to 5 years, I think it was 10. 10 of the people who appeared in this movie died before like 1972.
Wow, that's
crazy. That's kind of like it. There's very much kind of like a the right stuff kind of thing to this. These are like sort of like you know, Earth-born astronauts in this like insane kind of like masculine, vainglorious, like suicidal energy to like just put yourself in a fucking rocket and like go faster than anyone else alive, but like knowing full well that like there is something very suicidal about it.
Yeah, like there's that one sequence where they explain the curved road, and that specific road is so bumpy that it never feels like there's suspension at all. And they I think they said they have to gear.
The tires are like leaving the ground sometimes.
Yeah, they have to change gears like every 2 seconds. So by the time they're finished the race, it's like 3,000 gear changes or something like that. And it's just like, I can't imagine being on a road where you're just going 120 miles per hour hoping that this thing doesn't hit one bad bump and you're just, off the road.
And they're driving in all weather. There's one point where they drive in the rain and like the mist is coming off the road as they're as they're driving on it, and they're kind of like slipping and sliding a little bit. And I think that's also the scene where one of the wheels comes off and the guy flies into 2 children bystanders.
Oh right, the French guy, yeah.
And you're kind of just like, and yeah, I think that's the Frenchman who does that one, and he's sort of an interesting character because he's sort of he's the front runner. I think he's the guy who's like he's been the world champion I think twice.
Yeah.
He's the one I think who ends up dying in the final race too.
Yeah.
But
he's the guy who dies
what a brutal death.
But he actually has, because again, these racing
in front of his wife who he's cheating on and mistress.
Yeah, none of these guys particularly
Which apparently
likable.
He's done a ton of times.
Yeah, even though there is like the movie does gesture towards sort of motivations and sympathies for kind of like each one. It just depends on how much you actually end up picking up on, because again, as much as the racing sequences are amazing, it is like a half hour of racing for a 2.5 hour movie, and it really is like a lot of downtime with the characters in kind of like this melodrama. And there are a couple interesting moments. I did like the bit where the Frenchman talks to the girl who he's kind of like wooing a little bit, or she seems sort of intrigued by him as a racer, and he's talking about racing.
Yeah.
And she's talking about how horrible it was that one guy almost died on the racetrack. And he's just like, he explains to her that like the reason he's a winner is because he's grown increasingly cynical about racing. And he's like, yeah, when someone crashes like that, like that's how I know to put the pedal on the metal like harder.
Right.
Because everyone else will slow down and stop and be worried about that person for like a split second. He's like, that doesn't occur to me because I need to win. And she says something along the lines of like, what a terrible way to win.
Yeah.
And he's just like, there's nothing terrible about winning.
Yeah. That's just all they're out for.
Yeah. So like there are sort of like, they try to carve out interesting shades for these characters, but I do think like these characterizations are broad enough that they do kind of get a little crippled under the weight of like a 3-hour movie. Like this does not end up feeling as like rich in text as something like the other 3-hour movies we've talked about, like Lawrence of Arabia, for one.
Yeah, no,
even
this movie does not wear, like to like a contemporary audience, like this movie does not wear its length particularly well. Certainly not like Lawrence of Arabia, which at 4 hours just is like a joy and a breeze at every single moment. But yeah, like if you're into cars and like this is just like huge, like classic like 60s era, just like huge, like I said, international cast, international locations, like amazing,
huge cameras. I think I read that they
cameras.
Yeah, well, because I think I read that the filming for this required the use of every single existing Panavision 70mm camera that was out there at the time. They literally called them all in to shoot this movie.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
this is just like the height of like just grand like 60s filmmaking, like in every respect of like every just like of technical filmmaking, like an amazing spectacle. But I guess I would say like you could probably just watch like the first and last 20 minutes of the movie.
Well, before we go, we definitely have to mention the opening credits for this. We talked about it on our previous John Frankenheimer episode because Saul Bass did the opening. He did the opening credits for Seconds, which are amazing.
Yeah,
which are just these extreme, like mutating, distorted close-ups of like a human face.
Yeah.
Which obviously kind of lends itself to the identity thriller where someone has like paid a corporation to give him a new body, a new face to live out a new life, and then that corporation in turn decides to swallow him whole. So like these extreme sort of like disgusting close-ups of like an eye and a mouth distorting, and Saul Bass put like these really creepy strings on it and stuff too. And then he also did the opening credits for this, and he did a lot of obviously opening credits for Hitchcock
closing
films.
up on all the nuts and bolts.
Those extreme close-ups of like inside of the engine, or when they're sort of like they're taking the nuts and bolts and they're making them tighter. The back shots of like the sort of like streak and glow of their helmets, and like the sheen of the cars, and like the texture of the tires.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think that there was score. It's all just the sound design of the cars again.
Yeah, it's engines revving. And,
Which again, he went and took and used in the actual action set pieces for Ronin, but you can see him start to mess with that here. So it's interesting, actually, watching him develop the first ever filming of cars this way, and using working with Formula One drivers, and then watching him apply that later to a stylish like crime movie, but apply the same techniques and a lot of the same people.
Something I also wanted to mention with the overture, that's the first piece of music. The horns, it doesn't continue, but I thought that this was a great effect. I didn't look up who composed it, but it's genius. This part, he takes horns and he makes them kind of like sweep in and out, and it makes it sound like what cars do, like when they pass you. So it goes like,
oh, I see.
And it was such a cool. It's just a very, very smart way to kind of place
Speaking
the tone
of which,
of the film.
The composer was Maurice Jarre, who was the composer for Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago.
Oh, well, shit, there you go. Incredible. Very, very good.
Nailed it.
Yeah, but that was a great opening. I thought that was genius.
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, I think leaning over here into the reductive rating round and kind of final statements on this one, for me, this gets I would say it gets a high 3.
Yeah.
I do think that it has like absolutely astonishing racing sequences that we've already talked about in depth here. For me, it was just the drama felt a little bit broad, a little bit soapy, and kind of like that old Hollywood way. That's not necessarily bad. I mean, in fact,
I just think there's too much of it.
Well, and like this exact
kind
of movie
doesn't need to be
just
3 hours long.
It's just derivative. Like this exact kind of movie like exists in so many different contexts that I've seen exploring like kind of like the 30s through 50s canon of Hollywood. Like you can see this exact same movie play out, but like with cowboys or with like pilots as like kind of like the dangerous thing that they do. I did like
the way that the journalist at the end, when she's kind of like, she has the blood on her hands and she's like, "Is this what you wanted?" At least there's like some
little on the nose, but it's cool.
But you know what I mean? Yeah. There's something there. They're trying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just funny because like this exact kind of movie,
I just found it better than like the relationship stuff. That was all.
Yeah,
at least they're speaking on kind of the industry and the drivers themselves. And
for me, there's just nothing about this that is like better than like something like in a Howard Hawks movie, like Only Angels Have Wings or something like that, which is like a 1930s one about like a pilot community, and like it's really, really rich in the text of characters who like are in this small island and they're taking pilot transports in and out, but it's really dangerous to drive in that kind of like tropical weather.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pilots die in the film, and like the characters are really hurt by this, and because the rest of the film is like a hangout film. So imagine it's kind of like that opening, like that first 2 hours of like Dirty Dozen, where it's like you get to really fall in love with these characters and hang out with them and watch them have good times, and then they sort of get picked off in this really dramatic way. And I feel like this never just developed that rapport of like the hangout movie. Like I never sat, it wasn't like Rio Bravo where you're sitting there and you just wish you could have more time hanging out with these characters.
My rifle, my pony, and me.
Exactly. Like there's nothing like that in this. Like in fact, actually, you're kind of a little annoyed at some of the characters, or you think that sometimes that they're being rude or bad, or and there's not a lot of scenes where they're ever together. I find it's mostly like separate dramas, and then they all connect in the race.
That all connect,
like, but they're never really connecting much outside of that. So I feel like they could have had something more there, but they never fully quite hit it home to make it have more moving effect on you. But that again does not change the fact that like the absolute like technical precision, and I do think that John Frankenheimer is genuinely more interested in the technical precision of the car stuff as a filmmaker, because it honestly is more emotional. Just like,
I mean, he even ends with the film with kind of the tip of the hat to the drivers themselves, and not like the drama that went through, right? So
just like the actual technical precision of the racing scenes and stuff, you can feel like the heart and soul is more in those
In there,
sequences.
definitely.
Even the like split screen effects and all the different techniques he employs to really get you into the zone of racing seem to be where he was interested in. So yeah, because of that, like solid high 3 for me probably.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm gonna give it the same. It's just a lot of the drama just didn't really work for me. Kind of same as what you were saying. One thing I thought that was decent though, just to throw it out there, was the some moments between Scott, who was the guy that did the initial crash, and then his wife, who he's having a lot of issues with. And
he's the most sympathetic character of the bunch for
Definitely.
sure. He's like
But
the
what
underdog comeback story of the
yeah,
movie.
but what I found interesting is when they have that discussion and they just agree that they're going to be together, even though they know that their decisions aren't gonna make each other happy. And then after that conversation, he still asks her, like, do you think this is all gonna be worth it? And she's just kind of like, dude, I've already told you, this is up to you. You know what I mean? Like, I've told you that I'm not on board with what you're doing.
And
I
you
found
want to do it
interesting
anyway.
that his
so-
character, even at the end, after all he's went through, still can't understand his wife's perspective on it. And I thought that actually worked really well.
And he died 6 months later.
God damn it. But yeah, high 3 for me. Still had a lot of fun with it.
I'm in total agreement with you guys. I would say that, like, this is a must-see if you're like a Frankenheimer completist.
Yeah.
If you are a, car guy, or
Definitely
just like
that,
are
yeah.
obsessed
All my
with
car
the-
guys out there
Yeah,
represent.
or if you're just like obsessed with like the technical wizardry in like the filmmaking technique of the car chases.
Yeah.
But to echo your points, like a lot of the the emotional plot lines of the film itself are not terribly compelling or never really like amount to a whole lot, but you do get Toshiro Mifune in an American film, so that's cool.
Hell yeah, you love to see that. And also, I don't know if you guys felt this watching this. George Lucas totally ripped this off for the pod racing stuff, right?
Oh,
like all the little bits where they're like
Definitely.
flicking the little switches inside and like they're looking at each other like directly and like they're kind of in the little compartments with no windshields and like looking at each other.
100%.
And like when that crash happens, I'm pretty sure the visual language is the same. Like when the kid like fucks up the other guy and he crashes to the side and stuff like that. Like I was watching it and I was just like, damn, George. All right.
that's actually spot on, I think.
Thanks, dude.
Oh, and I have one final stray thought that I forgot about Ronin.
Hell yeah.
And that is that I think Ronin was basically made possible by Frankenheimer agreeing to take over a legendary disaster, the island of Dr. Moreau, after Richard Stanley was fired from it.
I did hear about that.
I feel like I've heard of
Like
this,
basically, if he agreed to do that movie, like based on like he was like, I'll do this piece of shit, like give me,
I'll fucking finish it,
like a multiple picture deal with United Artists. So like Island of Dr. Moreau is why we have Ronin. And I would highly recommend the documentary about the making of Island of Dr. Moreau and Richard Stanley, Lost Souls.
Okay,
I've
we'll
had
see.
that on my list, actually.
I have to see that because I actually, for the first time in a while, like I finally have been diving into Richard Stanley. I watched Hardware for the first time, and I also watched Dust Devil.
I've added those to the list because of you, yeah.
Hardware, by the way, is amazing.
Well, it's very good, low-budget horror movies, but now Hardware is great, but now is the time to get on board the Richard Stanley train, because almost like it was plucked from my head and made specifically for me, Richard Stanley is directing right now an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space starring Nicolas Cage.
Starring Nicolas Cage.
Okay, Will, don't freak
He's my
out.
favorite actor.
But for my publication out of New York, the film stage
so
that I'm
excited.
writing for at TIFF, it's not being directed, it's done. It is headlining the TIFF Midnight Madness genre element of the festival.
You fucker.
And I called dibs on writing about it. I messaged my editor and I was like, if I don't get to write about Color Out of Space, I will actually not go. So he was like, okay, it's yours. So I will be seeing the first press screening of Color Out of Space in like Actually, by the time you guys are listening to this, I've probably already written about the film.
I have so much rage and envy.
Okay, well, I was just at H.P. Lovecraft's grave last weekend. So
Yeah, no, I saw all of that, and I was very excited to tell you because I didn't know that you had heard about the movie yet. I was just like, oh, maybe Will doesn't know that there's a Richard Stanley H.P. Lovecraft, but of course he does. He already knows.
Richard Stanley is the perfect director to direct what is, I think, my favorite H.P. Lovecraft.
I actually, because I'm going to be writing about it, I just read
that.
it, and it is amazing. It freaked the shit out of me reading that story.
Awesome. I'm so excited.
So,
plus Nick Cage. I mean, the Cage, baby. Come on now.
Hot off of Mandy.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, so I think that will wrap it up for this week's episode. Thanks so much for joining us here, Will. If you've got anything to plug, this is the place to do it.
Listen to episode 1 and Come Town if you haven't done so already.
Nice
podcast. Check them out.
Short and sweet. So yeah, I'm at the Toronto International Film Festival right now that you guys are listening to this. So if you guys want to see anything that I'm writing about it at the film stage. I'm probably posting it on Twitter right now. But there's all kinds of nonsense I'm seeing. I will be there, yes, watching the Joker film, the incel king of comedy Joker. I will be there. I'm also watching a ton of like awesome, like what looks like sort of like there's these Korean horror films. There's Italian films there. I'll be watching The Lighthouse because I'm super stoked about seeing Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson.
Hell yeah, dude.
Brother, I'm very jealous of you.
Also, I will be writing about Uncut Gems. I might have already written about it.
Well, you're just trying to make us pissed off.
So if you guys are interested in any of those films, I've either already written about them or will be at the time that you guys are listening to this. But in 1 week's time from you guys hearing this episode, we have our bonus Patreon episode for you guys, and we will be there's a new Rambo movie out, and we've only talked about on this show. We did our very early episode.
Town Road.
We did First Blood. And we did Rolling Thunder 1977 as a double feature very early on in the show. So this time we're going to do Rambo First Blood Part 2. Oh, yeah. We're going to do Rambo 3, and we are going to do Rambo 2008 as a trilogy episode.
By the way, I still can't believe they used Old Town Road for the new trailer for Rambo. That's incredible.
Quick Rambo 3 shout out, and I guess this is the plug. The dedication of the Chapo book is to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan. And when the paperback comes out in October, we have changed the dedication to the brave people of Afghanistan, like they did for the subsequent VHS release of the film.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking a lot about that when we hit that episode on Patreon next week. So that's what we're talking about next week to line up with the release of Rambo Last Blood.
So good.
And then bouncing off of that, we are going to be back with a special guest, Nathan Smith, a sort of like a American South film critic, and he is bringing on with him a follow-up to our Rambo episode that directly ties into it. Missing in Action and POW The Escape, which I believe are vaguely rah-rah America Chuck Norris,
Chuck Norris
Vietnam.
movies?
I think Missing in Action is Chuck Norris, and then POW The Escape I think might also be, and it also is based on the sort of like Beau Gritz conspiracies about there still being POW prisoners in Vietnam, despite like the war being over and them having sent them all back already, which is what they based Rambo 2 on. So we're also going to be doing that in 2 weeks' time for all the free listeners.
That's amazing.
But yes, that will wrap it up for this week's episode. Thanks as always for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.
Cheers.